Of course, darling, you know those are difficult times because they are always after us. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that they want to hound us. That is what you can see, that they always want to shoot us, to put us a bullet in the head. Of course, darling, that is what you see, that they are always trying to sacrifice around me. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that it's a curse I have since I was born, of course, because I'm the son from Connie, of course, and my grandfather is in this enterprise from bringing God back on town, of course, and they want to clean the blood with some cross or something like that. Of course, darling, that is what you can say, that they want to deny me and give my money to some cross, of course, and that this money is blessed, of course, and that I'm the devil and something to deny, of course, darling, that is what you can see, but I don't believe in them, and that's why they are trying to suicide every time around me, of course, darling, that is what you can see, that they make sacrifices like Maya's and nasty kids around me. Of course, darling, they cut my head and they sacrifice somebody, of course, and say that the body is your father, the father from my kids. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, and I'm in this enterprise of bringing God back on town, of course, darling. That is what you can see, that they tried the whole time to deny me and bring some cross, of course, that is what you can see, and that's since ever, of course, since before I started to play, of course, darling, they were making movies around me, they were keeping me away from my life and from my money and from my wife, of course, darling. Of course, darling, and I had enough from being the stallion. Of course, darling, they only want my NDA, my DNA. Of course, darling, that's what you can see, that they want my DNA and then deny me. Of course, darling, I'm bringing clean blood with a cross, of course, and I had enough. Of course, darling, I'm in the middle from everything. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that I could be God, but I'm not. Of course, darling, to be God, I should have to die. Of course, darling, that is what you can see. Glory is only for death people. Of course, darling, that is more brave to stay alive. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that everyone should live until the end. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, and they are all suiciding and making sacrifices around me. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that they sacrifice and suicide around me to be God. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that they want to be the cross, they want to be God, of course, and that I hurt them or something like that. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, and I count a lot of people there. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, I count a lot of people trying to bring God back on town by denying me. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that no one can against me, that I try to stay alive, but they are all trying to bring death around me. Of course, darling, that is what you can see, that they are making disappear Jews and communists, or they are making disappear communists, and they say that they are Jews, of course, and take their lives away, throw crosses at them, and throw crosses at them, and say that their kid is son from God, and bring a Joseph and things like those. Of course, darling, they think that the communists are the devil and they take their lives away and then they bring Joseph from the righties, of course, darling. And so it is here, of course, darling. And so they are making disappear a lot of people, of course, darling. That is what you can see. That is what they are doing all around the world, of course, darling. That is what you can see. That they are making disappear communists and they make them Jews, of course, darling. And that is what you can see. That we only have Russian roulette and diamonds, of course, darling. And we are trying to not burn, of course, darling. That is what you can see. And we are trying to dodge death and death, of course, darling. That is what you can see. That we are trying to dodge them, but that's what you can see. And they are the whole time throwing bodies at us, of course, darling. That is what you can see. And I only want to give you a kiss to bring you back to life, of course, darling. That is what you can see, because I have enough from this whole people, because I'm not attacking them, of course, darling. I don't even want to be with them, of course, darling. They brought me always in, of course, darling. They have me as a stallion to have my DNA, of course, darling, and to clean my blood with some cross and deny me, of course, darling, that I'm the stallion from the mafia, of course, darling. And I had enough, of course, darling. And of course I know a lot, of course, darling, because if you are the stallion from the mafia, you know a lot about the mafia, of course, darling. But I don't even want to know about them, darling. That is what you can see, that I give a damn about them, of course, darling. That I give a damn about the pimps and a lot of pimps and all kind of pimps they have in the Orange and in places like them, of course, and in the Vatican City, of course, darling, that they have a lot of pimps and all kind of pimps and sacrifices and Aztecs and pyramids and things like those, of course, darling. I know a lot about them, but only because they use me to have my DNA and bring God back on town by these moves. Of course, darling, in the Orange and Baby Enterprise, they have Catholic freedom, of course, darling, and they are with the Catholic freedom trying to make the states get loans so they cannot pay back, so the states and the representation of the people falls, and that we are all slaves from the great enterprises, of course, darling. And things like those I could tell, but everyone knows that it's not a secret. The only thing I know is that my life is in this Catholic freedom enterprise, in this Orange, of course. And I give a damn, and they are trying that I don't speak, but I give a damn, darling, of course. But that's what you can see, that they are breaking the representation from the people with the state. They are breaking the representation from the people and making us slaves from the great enterprises and things like that. Of course, darling, that's the worst, of course, because we are gonna all be slaves from the enterprises, of course, darling, and they are there with pimps and all kind of pimps and drugs and things like those, but I don't care, darling. I know if you would take the very loud. You would see everything what this orange hide, but you don't wanna. It's not my problem. I don't care. Of course, everyone knows about taking and things like those. Of course, and I give a damn. And if I have to poison them, I let them be alive and to stop this whole pyramid and Catholic freedom and pimps. I'm gonna do it, darling, but I only want to give you a kiss who brings you back to life. Of course, darling, I want that you're really alive. Of course, darling, you know I'm a sugar daddy. Of course, darling, I play with the girls. Of course, if I really we play with you because I'm a sugar daddy and we have fun and we love you so much. But it's only sugar daddy moves. Of course, darling, but I'm against playing with money who isn't yours. Of course, darling, but that's what you can see that I have a lot of beautiful women who play with me. Of course, darling, and we play games with you. Of course, with my money. Of course, I'm the sugar daddy from those bitches. Of course, darling, but we have fun with that. But I'm against playing with money who isn't yours. Of course, darling, that's the difference. You know, I'm gonna give you away, and you're gonna find a man. Of course, darling, I love you so much.